And the face in the mirror answered, "Lips red as a rose, hair black as ebony, skin white as snow." "Snow White," the queen hissed.
Storybugs.
Hello and welcome to Storytime. We are going to read a new chapter book called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and maybe you've seen the movie. We're going to read the chapter book. And this one was adapted from the film by Jim Rossi, illustrated by Fernando Guel and Fred Marvin. I really like this very first Disney princess movie that I ever saw. Chapter 1. In a little kingdom, graced with rolling hills, sparkling rivers, and bountiful forests, there once lived a lovely young princess named Snow White. Snow White was not only kind, but beautiful as well. Her hair was the deepest ebony, her complexion the purest ivory. Snow White's father, the king, was dead, so she lived in the palace with her stepmother, the queen. And although the queen was also very beautiful, her beauty was only skin deep. Inside she was cold and heartless, and as evil as an ugly old witch. The queen was very jealous of Snow White's beauty, so much so that she forced the little princess to dress in tattered rags and made her work long hours as a scullery maid. The queen thought that disguised in this way, Snow White's beauty could never rival her own. Still, that wasn't enough to satisfy her vanity. In a dark and foreboding part of the castle, the queen kept a magic mirror, and every day she would stand before the ornate mirror and chant, "Magic mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And every day the surface of the mirror would swirl like a dark whirlpool, and a grim face would appear as if rising from the depths. "You are the fairest one of all," the face would answer. Queen would smile and nod and be content. As time went on, however, Snow White's beauty became more and more apparent in spite of the queen's efforts to hide it. So it was on that one bright sunny day when the queen asked the mirror her usual question. It replied in its deep, somber voice, "Famed is thy beauty, majesty, but hold, a lovely maid I see. Rags cannot hide her gentle grace. Alas, she is more fair than thee." The queen stiffened in shocked surprise. Then she lowered her eyebrows and said, "Alas for her! Reveal her name." And the face in the mirror answered, "Lips red as a rose, hair black as ebony, skin white as snow." "Snow White," the queen hissed. At the very moment the queen was consulting her magic mirror, Snow White was busy scrubbing the stone steps of the courtyard below. I'll show you this picture first. The work was hard, but Snow White performed the task in good spirits, and now she sang prettily as a flock of white doves fluttered around her, cooing and bobbing. When she turned to draw water from a nearby well, Snow White peered down at her reflection and was quite startled to see another face next to hers. "Oh!" she cried. Looking up, she saw a handsome man in the fine dress of a prince standing right beside her. "Oh!" she cried again, backing away. "Did I frighten you? I didn't mean to," the prince said with concern. "It's just that I heard such a lovely song as I was riding by." Snow White was so flustered she couldn't speak. Finally, she bolted towards the castle door, scattering the doves in her wake. "Wait, "Please don't go," cried the prince. "I'd like to talk to you some more." But Snow White was already running up the castle's winding stone steps to a small balcony that overlooked the courtyard. When she reached the balcony, she peeked past the heavy curtains and looked down. The prince was still there, gazing up at the castle. He looked so handsome and seemed so kind that Snow White felt drawn to him. Timidly at first, and then more boldly, she stepped closer to the balcony's edge. When the prince saw her, he couldn't help but smile. She was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. "Please come back," he urged. "I must get to know you." Snow White smiled too, but still did not move from the balcony. As the prince continued to entreat her to return, a dove flew up onto Snow White's hand. On impulse, she kissed the dove and bade it fly down to the young man below. The dove gently fluttered down to the prince and kissed him in return. The prince blushed and cried, "I shall never forget you." And with that, Snow White withdrew into the dark castle. Unknown to either Snow White or the prince, the queen had been watching this tender scene, which filled her with even more anger and jealousy. Now the ruler nodded, as if she had made up her mind to carry out an evil plan. In fact, she had. She called her chief huntsman to her throne. When the huntsman arrived, the queen commanded him in a firm voice, "Take Snow White far into the forest. Find some secluded glade where she can pick wildflowers." "Yes, your majesty," said the huntsman. "And there, my faithful huntsman, you will kill her." Although the huntsman was a hardened man, he gasped and stared at his queen. "But your majesty," he cried, "the little princess." "Silence," snapped the queen. "You know the penalty if you fail." The huntsman bowed his head. "Yes, your majesty," he said solemnly. Then the queen paused and held out an ornate red box. Its clasp was formed by a jeweled dagger piercing a golden heart. "But to make doubly sure you do not fail," the queen continued, "bring back her heart in this." The huntsman took the box and slowly nodded his head. Chapter 2. We'll leave it there. Let's see if the huntsman will continue the plan. Oh, thank you guys for joining me. I hope you'll come back for chapter 2. If you guys enjoyed reading that story, would you please click subscribe down below? We read new stories just like this one every day, and we would love to let you know when there's a new story to listen to.